Welcome to the April 11th edition of the PFF Forecast. The reason I'm laughing is because Eric came in here, thinks he's wearing black, asked if he's looking slim. We've got a great show. We're going to talk about the Masters because we're recording this a little early for a special reason. We're going to talk about one of the worst tweets and worst things that has ever made sports television this year. And we're going to talk about some of our draft props investments that are about to happen. And of course, as promised, the NFC Win Totals. Let's rock. Before we get started, got to remind you guys all the great stuff coming down draft week at PFF. Of course, go to pff.com right now, get an Edge subscription. It's $40 for the whole freaking year, and you get the draft guide, access to the big board, all the premium draft content you could possibly want, plus fantasy rankings and fantasy insight for next season, all the way through next season. That's at pff.com. But this draft show this year, the PFF draft show, is going to be pretty spectacular. It's going to be streaming live on pff.com April 29th, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have the whole crew in here, myself, Eric, Chris, Mike, Steve, Sam, the whole deal. They're going to be here, and it's going to have a live updating draft tracker. So you come to pff.com, hear everything you need to know about all of the draft picks, how they're going to fit into their teams. It's going to be the best draft show you could possibly imagine. Of course, the best companion with that is the PFF Draft Guide, so go get that now. It's got 300 player profiles, the whole deal. And remember, April 29th, 7 p.m. Eastern, pff.com. Make it happen. We'll see you there. So if people are watching this YouTube, I would like them to know that you came in and asked if I look skinny today because, quote, black is a thinning color.
So is this like gray?
It's definitely
Charcoal?
We can go with charcoal. I will give you charcoal. I think charcoal is a little generous. I would go gray. Yeah.
Okay.
Although in fairness,
which is also the color of like what's.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm growing this out for maybe a week more, and then I'm gonna for the draft show try to look nice.
Oh, interesting. Does growing it out help it look nicer when you trim it down?
Well, it gives you more freedom, right? Because if you cut too low, then you can only like wait for it.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas like I can decide the length of the beard / goatee if I start high, right? Because I can't build hair out of free hair.
Are you saying it takes you like multiple weeks for your facial to grow out at all?
Have you not noticed? We've been friends for like 4 years.
Okay.
I don't even have like an adult beard. Like I have patchy patches of Houlihan over here.
Are you keen on the Instagram advertisements for beard growth? Have you seen these things?
No, come on.
It's incredible. So there's, I don't even want to give them like publicity, but there is a brand literally that claims that they have this like, it almost looks like a lint roller, but it's like a roller with micro spikes in it that supposedly like arouses the hair follicles in your cheeks.
That's not true.
I mean, here's the funny thing is you can sell anything on Instagram because you just make it look good and people go, everything on Instagram looks good. I'm just going to buy it.
I do know that there are like special beard like shampoos and stuff. Like there are other podcasts that like,
Yeah, and I think it's all bullshit. So I'm pretty sure that if you really want like thicker facial, you just have to grow it out for a really long time.
Yeah, I think that's probably how Jesus did it. I'm fairly certain that's.
But the funny thing is, like, a lot of people, they look at like celebrities and go, "Oh, celebrities, like their facial hair looks great." And it's like, yeah, they have professional, surgically implanted hair. Like, when you're that rich, you can look fantastic everywhere you want.
It's how Tom Brady went from having a butt chin to like not having.
Tom Brady looked awful 25 years ago and has gotten better looking every single year going forward.
By the way, there's gonna be somebody in the YouTube comments gonna be like, the actual show starts 5:45. You know, like just because we talked about real human stuff.
It's important to know.
It is important to know
when the actual show starts. If you don't want to listen to this, that's the beautiful thing about technology. You can
like if you want to go to the Joe Rogan podcast and you want to hit the 15-second thing for the first 15 minutes of the podcast, you can do it.
Look, it's actually it strengthens my thumb.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like the thing that strengthens your necks that he talks about. I'm not even
Elk
kidding.
meat?
No, I'm not even kidding. He advertises a neck strengthening device that legitimately looks like something you use as like a sex toy if you're really down south. I mean, like, anyways, we'll start talking about Alpha Brain soon enough.
Sure.
Let's start here. We're recording a little earlier today because, as advertised, I gave out a few picks for the Masters. Now, not all of them worked out. I understand that. But let me tell you what they were. We're going to recap here, okay? So we went with Colin Morikawa. He was 30-1. Tony Finau was 40-1. I said I liked Brooks to finish top 10. That didn't go well. He didn't make the cut. However, Tony Finau at 40-1, he's probably going to finish top 10. Xander Schauffele was the other one, 25-1. I think Xander's going to win today. So Xander's in the final group. He's got Hideki Matsuyama, who's 4 in front. Now, 4 is a big lead, but he's playing in the final group. It's a little windy. Hideki Matsuyama has the entire weight of Japan on his shoulders. All he's got to do is
all you need is
a
two increase from each guy. You know, two strokes for him and 2 strokes for Xander. Yeah.
So here's how I'm playing it. If it is 3 shots or less heading into the back 9, I am betting the shit out of this live. My take on this is that it is very hard. It is very hard to hold the lead on the back 9. I think Xander Schauffele has played incredibly well. He hits it. He's a smaller guy, but he hits it super deep. His iron plays are money. And here's the thing about Matsuyama. He's got this pause at the top of his backswing, and it forces, if there's any lack of timing with his shot, it can go south pretty quickly. So anyways,
nice.
I'm just saying I really like the 25-1 spot that I'm in right now, and I've got to go sweat it out.
I did put a small amount on that as well. Honestly, I'm looking forward to at least checking in on it. I'm not going to watch, but I'll check in on it.
Look, a 25-1 hit is pretty solid. I think when I bet Tiger in 2019, I think I got him at 45 or 50-1 because I bet it almost a year out. And the thing with betting in the Masters, if you're betting someone to win, you can't bet any of the favorites, and it showed this week. I think like Dustin Johnson didn't make the cut. Rory did not play well. The bet here, let me just say this: watching Bryson DeChambeau. Do you know who Bryson DeChambeau even is?
No, I know he has a great drive. I was listening to the
kind of.
So I was listening to, actually it's a great podcast. Stephen Levitt, who wrote the Freakonomics books, has a podcast called People I Mostly Admire. And this week he had a golfer, and then he had the guy, I believe, from Data Golf on, and they were talking about him as the driver. Gives up some accuracy for the extra drive, but apparently that is what you want to do in golf. I did not know this, but apparently being like a 20 yards more per drive guy is worth like 1.4 strokes, and then the loss in accuracy is worth like a third of a stroke. So then he's in the clear. So like that's all I know about him.
Yeah, the problem is he's fucking terrible.
Okay.
And he used to be a little skinnier. He wears those stupid looking hats. It's not a real hat.
Like a visor?
No, it's I don't know what you call it, a smoking cap or something. Fuck, it's not it. But
I was actually legitimately thinking of wearing a bucket hat today. It was a bucket hat type
It would be
of day.
better if he wore a bucket hat. Anyways, the deal with him is he put on like 50 pounds, probably half fat, half muscle, and swings as hard as he possibly fucking can at the ball. And barely hits it further than like Brooks or DJ, who are out here just being normal people that like work out and hit the ball far, and is obnoxious about it. All his clubs are the same size. He talks about physics all the time. He putts like a fucking moron because he holds the club up to his arm, and like he's fucking terrible. Anyways, he sucks this week. And he always sucks at the Masters because the Masters will never let some moron like him.
So the Masters is more of like an unforgiving course, if you will.
Well, the driving distance helps, but if he's not hitting it straight that frequently, and he can't putt, and it's all about the approach shot, and like he is not good enough hitting his approach shots to really take advantage of those drives at Augusta. And Augusta really, the iron play is that's why Tiger won there so many times. No one was better in iron play.
So it's interesting because I was listening to this, and I'm going to bring it back to football, fellas. This is what I'm going to do here.
Podcast starts.
So they were making a claim that statistically speaking in golf, you were better off going for the big shots early. Like basically the strokes gain that you get from your early shots matter way more than the noisy stuff. Mm-hmm. And I feel like trying to take this back to football, it got me thinking that. And I'm also reading some of Richard Thaler's book. I think it's called Misbehaving, which is actually there are people who write really well. Like Malcolm Gladwell's it kind of has some weird opinions, mm-hmm. but like just easy to read. Thaler's this way, and he was talking about risk aversion in the sense of like we view the 10-yard pass, all 10 of them sort of linearly, and then but when it comes to like these long gains, we don't like. It's diminishing returns in our own brain, how we view it. But I feel like what's true about golf is also true about football in the sense that like the where you make your money is like from your own 0 to the other team's 20 in trying to get chunk. And that's like why Arthur Smith's had success. That's why Kyle Shanahan's had success. And then once you get in the red zone, obviously it's almost all noise. There's not a ton you can do to be a great red zone team. You know what I mean? But from in football, should we think of those first 80 yards as the drive, right? The approach, and then think about the red zone as, you do that for dough, right? But it's the backwards way of thinking about it, right? Like you shouldn't select for great red zone play because great red zone play is whatever. Like it's noisy. It depends upon who you're facing and noise and stuff. But you should be trying to just get chunk after chunk after chunk in the middle of the football field, which I don't think a lot of teams actively do. I think a lot of teams want to be like, I'm going to get 6 or 7 yards at a time, which to me is kind of like being like,
you want to start the drive with momentum.
Yeah, but isn't it similar to a golfer basically saying like, I'm going to be pretty average on all the shots, which I feel like is really silly because you just have to even get to a place where you can two-putt to even be effective.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points. I would use a slightly different analogy in that I think the similarity is in the consistency of first and second downs relative to third downs. So people like to get excited about hot putters or teams that have been great on third down and ignore the other two things, first and second down. We talk about first and second down all the time. And first and second down to me are like your drives and your approach shots where if you're good at them consistently, that's what I care about in the long run. If you get streaky on third down, can you win a tournament?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Good point.
Then, yeah, absolutely.
It's Carson Wentz in 2017, by the way, who's a Super Bowl apparently doesn't count
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so we got to talk about this. But we're going to get to the win totals, I promise. Jeremy Schaap tweeted out today. To reiterate, this was on Outside the Lines. 44 quarterbacks.
Which is outside the lines, by the way, of reasonable human thought.
Let's read the tweet. 44 quarterbacks have gone first, second, or third in the last 50 NFL drafts, and exactly 2, Aikman and Peyton, have won Super Bowls starting for the teams that drafted them. Important to note that. That makes selecting QBs up high exceptionally risky. My parting shot on at OTL on ESPN.
So there's a couple things that are wrong with this. Let's assume he's right. Okay? Let's assume everything he says is factually true, which we'll tear apart in a second. What is the actionable information here?
I would select Quentin Nelson.
We know that quarterback, like everybody's like, oh, I had mentions in here because I went on a tweet storm about it. Surprise, surprise. And somebody was like, well, if football is a team game, build a team first. I'm like, football is way less of a team game than you motherfuckers want to admit, right? Think about the Cleveland. Cleveland drafted one of the best players in the history of football, Joe Thomas. And Joe Thomas was amazing. He lived up to the billing 10 times over. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter. They didn't make the playoffs one time in his career. And there are examples of like Andrew Luck joined the Colts fresh off of being so bad that they had to start Dan Orlovsky for like multiple games. And he took that team and like Pep Hamilton's terrible. Eventually Chuck Pagano's terrible. And he's dragging people on his back and taking that team to the AFC Championship game.
Without a spleen.
Without a spleen. Apparently that doesn't count. But then secondarily to this, right, by the way.
Hold on. Also, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, we're ignoring the fact that rookie quarterbacks who are average to above average have taken their teams to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Matt Ryan doesn't count.
By virtue of being such an incredibly great deal.
Yeah. But Matt Ryan at 3 apparently doesn't count because his defense can hold a 28-3 lead. Think about this. In 1993, the New England Patriots were so bad and so irrelevant that they were thinking of moving to St. Louis. And they draft Drew Bledsoe. And not only does Bledsoe take them to a Super Bowl in 96, he didn't win it, so it doesn't count to Jeremy Schaap. Right. But he takes the team to the Super Bowl. But now the Patriots are like literally the taste of Boston all the time. And it's because they took them, they didn't have a winning like year from like 88 to 93. They get Parcells, they get Bledsoe, and it changes the course of the franchise. Same thing with Atlanta. Atlanta was coming off of a year where Vic's in prison and they had to start Byron Leftwich and Joey Harrington. They were underdogs week 1 to the Lions team that eventually went 0-16. That's how bad the Falcons were when they had Matt Ryan. And they go and they've had some bumps along the road, but they've been a relevant franchise, made a Super Bowl. Well,
then let's talk about the ones that are just being ignored.
That are being ignored by the statement. Yeah, I mean, even if this was, for one, having the Super Bowl be the number when a guy who was picked at 199 has won 14% of those Super Bowls is ridiculous anyway. But even among that, he's ignoring 3 players that have been like instrumental, like have won a huge amount of them. Terry Bradshaw was picked number 1 overall in 1970. So that's excluded. That's like the 51st year. So he's ignoring that. He won 4 of those 50 Super Bowls thereafter. So that's 8% that you're just ignoring. And then John Elway was picked first by the Baltimore Colts, traded to the Denver Broncos
it's only teams that drafted. Yeah. It's very risky. You could draft a quarterback and they could hate your team so much that they require a trade.
Elway was traded during the Nuggets game that night. And then he's like,
Eli, and you look at Eli, and Eli, goes on to win 2 Super Bowls. The player that he was traded for, Phillip Rivers, kept that franchise relevant for 15 seasons. I don't know. I mean, it's something that we've talked about a bunch, and we don't want to spend our time just burying people left and right because no one wants to listen to that. But it is important when you are in a position to deliver news and report on things that if you are in a position like you're on Outside the Lines on ESPN, do your fucking homework. Don't just lie to the people watching, because then they go out on Twitter and they're spewing this stuff out there also. You have an obligation to be somewhat logical in your statements. And that's just ridiculous, because now you're going to go, some poor person out there is going to hear that and go, oh, this is a great argument. And then they're going to take that and they're going to use it as an argument. And if someone hears it that has any sense, they're going to undress them.
There's somebody on here, there are people like, I bet the Rams would rather have, which Bosa is it? Joey Bosa. And it's like, are you kidding? I'm sorry, but we have to stop with this nonsense.
The Rams would rather have had Joey Bosa than Jared Goff.
The Rams were the losingest franchise in the league.
With the best defensive linemen that we've seen in the past 50 years.
But I'll even take it a step further. The Rams, when they had Scott Linehan, when they had Jim Haslett, friend of PF, when they had all those guys as the head coach, they were low-key, before Jeff Fisher, low-key one of the worst stretches of play in NFL history. Mm-hmm. And then they took Sam Bradford at first overall in, I believe, 10, and they paid him a ton, which they don't even get the edge there. But when you look at Bradford's years in St. Louis, it was 7-9, 8-8, at least some relevance. Mm-hmm. And then they fall off when they get rid of Bradford. And then they get Goff, and they were literally 4-12 in Goff's rookie year, and they take that, and yes, coaching helps, but also the rookie contract of a quarterback helps. They hadn't won consecutive NFC West titles since they were the LA Rams the first time. In the 70s, they win NFC West title, Super Bowl, 9-7 on that rookie deal. And it's it doesn't count. They'd rather have Nick Bosa. Go fuck. You rather have Case Keenum. Case Keenum was their quarterback. This is ridiculous.
Hey, Case Keenum was fantastic.
We have to stop with this. We have to stop with this idea, and we do it all the time. Bill Belichick took a running back. Our running back, the thing floating. Do running backs matter? And we do this with quarterbacks now. Oh, the Eagles won a Super Bowl, but now Carson Wentz isn't on the team. Do quarterbacks matter? And it's no, this is fucking ridiculous. The quarterback is the most important position in football. And in a year, I'm not saying
you can stop there. It's the most important position in sports. In team sports, there is not a single position that has more bearing on whether your franchise matters to anyone on the fucking planet than quarterback.
Yes, there are situations where you could prefer, like the Dolphins right now, or like take this, like we got flack for this. If Tua Tagovailoa is playing for Washington last year, do they have an 8-8 or better record? I would say so.
Sure.
Like Chase Young played great, right? But we saw the limitations of how great Chase Young could play in the games where they had a bad quarterback. By the way, a quarterback picked 15th because, that's where they ended up choosing. The whole public, every single adult in this conversation knows that first-round quarterbacks aren't 100% hit rates. We know that Bortles exists. We know that E.J. Manuel exists. We know that Jameis Winston, although Jameis Winston led the league in passing yards, we know that exists. We're all adults. But the fact is, like, no one wants to turn around and say, what's the alternative?
Well, here's the other thing about it that is challenging for people to understand is non-quarterbacks selected in the top 3 or top 5, if you want to extend it there, because quarterback is so important for a player to unseat selecting a quarterback in that position, they have to be remarkable.
Yeah.
So it's basically the freakiest of the freaky athletes make it into that top 5 as non-quarterbacks, and then are put in a position that's way easier to succeed as a rookie. So if you take, for example, a defensive lineman versus a quarterback as a rookie, the bar to clear for relevance or decency is so much higher for the quarterback because they have a shitty team around them. A defensive lineman is much more a one-on-one situation. And the same is true with running backs or wide receivers. Wide receivers depend on the quarterback a lot more, or offensive linemen and stuff like that. So
we're actually going to have the man who traded up for Julio Jones on the show pretty soon.
Teaser. This Wednesday, we are hoping.
We are hoping to have Thomas Dimitrov on the show.
Let's get into.
But that shows Julio, picked at whatever it was 6th, has produced about as much WAR as some of the has produced as much WAR as quarterbacks. But that's what you're up against. If you take a non-QB in that spot, you require him to be Julio Jones for it to work, right? And that's what we're dealing.
I think you could argue that even if you draft a Hall of Famer, does Julio's career, are we looking at Julio's career like that if they don't also have Matt Ryan? No.
I don't think so, but they were also not very good, by the way. So Julio's a rookie in 11, 12. 13, 14, they won 10 combined games because they gave up all those picks to go and get him. Cleveland did nothing with those picks, notwithstanding, but it does show if you're going to go up, you have to take a player that can transcend everything else. And the only players that can, both negatively and positively, by the way, but here's what I'll say. If you draft a quarterback that's so bad that he drops you down to 2, a la the Jets, look,
yeah.
The Jets could have had Kirk Cousins in 2018, took Sam Darnold. They're in a better position than Minnesota is picking 2 right now as a virtue of bottoming out.
I mean, I think the tough thing for people, especially teams and owners, is that if you draft drafting a Hall of Fame player that's not a quarterback feels like it's more valuable or a better pick than drafting an average to above average quarterback. And the reason that is they're thinking about jersey sales, people in the seats, all of the publicity, all that stuff. In terms of wins and losses, that's just simply not true.
The honest to God truth is a Super Bowl is such a low probability event that to measure to a decision maker, they need other measures of success. And the other measures of success is, look, I drafted Quentin Nelson and he ended up being good. And that to me is, again, sometimes prohibitive to the cause of winning football games.
Okay. We are going to talk about some win totals here. And the first thing that we're going to do before we get into the win totals is we are starting the Justin Fields 3rd overall syndicate. Right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, Mac Jones minus 300 to go 3rd, Justin Fields plus 250. And it is my belief that no one knows and that this line is completely out of whack. The only people that might know right now would be Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. They're notoriously secretive. I think it's I think it's possible that Mac Jones is selected third. Absolutely. Do I think it's minus 305? Do I think Justin Fields should be 2.5 to 1? By far the better prospect to go third overall? Absolutely not. How are you feeling on the eve, not the eve, but like a few hours before we start the syndicate?
Well,
you feel good?
Yeah. I think so. I think I'm almost done betting draft props because I do think the information, I do think in many cases in many cases you're just flipping coins. Like there's a couple I like, offensive lineman over, wide receiver over, offense over. This one I think is egregious, and it's where you make, it's sort of, as you talked about the other day, it's the McGregor.
It reminds me of Trump Biden.
But Trump Biden, the interesting thing with Trump Biden, this is why I don't think it's close to Trump Biden. But at close, Biden closed, I think, minus 230.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about at close. I'm talking about the way that line moved. So the way that I'm viewing this, right? So Trump Biden closing before the election started is not counted.
Sure. You're
talking about
middle
over the course of time within the election,
because the election
was process.
The election was something that depended upon a number of things.
The election was hey, information is coming out. Yeah. Let's take the information and make observations about it. And people completely shat themselves on identifying the information. And because of that, you had this once in a lifetime opportunity where someone that should have been favored to win was a huge underdog. Now, it's not quite. Actually, what did Biden get to? I thought he got to like plus 400.
No, it was like plus 700, dude. It
really?
I was so mad.
I think I bet him at
that
plus 350.
Essentially we got limited at that point. But this also will show you, by the way. So an NFL game, side and total, is extremely sharp. There's a ton of money. The limits are humongous depending upon where you go. Those markets are sharp, especially at places like Pinnacle, BetCris. I did a podcast last year with Pinnacle every week, and I got a DM from the person who saw their internals that said, "Hey, I'm sorry, but Trump has won." And that's somebody that's somebody in the process of setting the lines. And I would consider, and maybe I'm wrong, I think I would venture to guess that the sharpness of the election markets is similar, if not more sharp, than the draft markets, especially at places that take lower limits. And so if everybody's sitting here looking at that minus 305, and I'm guilty of this too because I've referenced Zach Wilson's number a ton, right? Like, so I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. But if you say Mac Jones is minus 305, it's over. I would push back at that a significant amount, and in which case you can move towards the logical conclusions, which is that there's another pick another prop I really like, but Justin Fields at plus 250 seems to me like the biggest value left on the entire board.
We've talked about the implicit bias, racial bias with JT O'Sullivan on the last pod, which, by the way, if you didn't listen to, you should go listen to it. That's definitely built in here. The media narrative is so negative about Justin Fields that we are even talking about him and Mac Jones. The conversation should be Justin Fields and Trevor fucking Lawrence, Justin Fields and Zach Wilson. Instead, Justin Fields, a Greek god of an athlete with a pinpoint accurate arm, is being compared to a motherfucker that looks like he literally lives at Krispy Kreme. I mean, it's fucking disastrous. And this is the idea that Kyle Shanahan...
All George is saying, by the way, is Krispy Kreme works.
The idea that Kyle Shanahan is the only motherfucker on planet Earth that looks at two people and goes, yeah, actually, I don't see weight. I don't see athleticism. All I see is, does he check the ball down a lot? It's fucking absurd.
So I'll come back a little bit. And we were talking about this yesterday. So the couple things, one on either side, that makes me think about this. On the positive side, John Lynch went from the broadcast booth to the Niners GM spot without even a peep of anybody knowing about it. Like, that reportedly was one of the tests that he had, which was, can you keep this entire process of me interviewing for this under wraps? I think the Niners were in a buying position because they had failed so much with the bulky Chip Kelly and Jim Tomsula, the mustache.
Leaks were literally the way that the Niners organization did business. Like it was the way that they did things from an internal perspective was the politics of it was done via leaking information. So John Lynch comes in and says, look, I am going to run this my way. And that starts with me feeling 100% confident that none of my shit gets leaked. Okay? So I am of the mind, and I have some reasons to believe this, that no one in the 49ers organization has any idea what Lynch and Shanahan are doing.
Which is, by the way, true of a number of them. So we
which
both
means,
know.
Which means, by the way, that when Schefter comes out and reports, I would be surprised if they don't take Mac Jones. First off, he works for ESPN, an organization that happens to be broadcasting the draft. So hey, tune in. But secondly,
if the first 3 picks are locks, it's bad for business, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
But secondarily, and first off, the first 2 picks are locks.
Yeah.
But secondarily, his sources are people on teams who also don't know, but guess what? Want to sound like they know.
Yeah. They want the cachet if they eventually, because we're talking. I mean, we're gonna be talking to him next, this week. But like, there is that transition from person in the front office or person even, because we have relationships with people and we'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And they'll tell us, like the good ones will say, I actually have no idea. And they're people who have the ears of a lot of these people. So you're right. Unless he's getting the information directly from Lynch or Shanahan, like it's probably not worthy of laying the 305 on Mac Jones. Let's just put it that way. And the only thing I'll push back on from the perspective of Shanahan wouldn't do this is Shanahan to some degree has, from a personnel side, he has made mistakes, right? So like running backs, if you look at like the Shanahanian system, the Kubiakian system, like you look, it's Reuben Drones, Mike Anderson, Orlandis Gary, Matt Burita, who's the guy for now, Raheem Mostert, like all those guys are, Steve Slayton, all those guys. They're all of them are like nobody running backs who that system turns into. Arian Foster is the biggest name, turns them into superstars. And yet Shanahan felt the need to sign Jerick McKinnon to a deal, Tevin Coleman to a deal. And so there isn't, and again, I think he's brilliant, especially on the field, but there is not necessarily 100% rationalness from him, rationality. That's the uncertainty that clouds it for me.
The only thing I'll push back on is so if you said, hey, actually I have a lot of proof that this guy is really wonky with personnel decisions, that would lead me to say, okay, sure, let me think about Mac Jones, except for the fact that the guys that he's signed all have, guess what? Super athleticism.
Which is the trait he likes in running backs. The remaining question is, which again, if he likes athleticism in his skill guys, it would stand to reason that he would like athleticism in his quarterback.
Kyle Shanahan's actually the only human on earth that looks for guys with a body fat percentage of 69%. He's the only guy. We're going to get to the NFC Win Totals in just a second, but first, DraftKings and the DraftKings Sportsbook app are giving you $100. Yes, they're giving you $100 to go spend on all the draft props, all the win totals of your heart's desire. Here's what you have to do. Just use promo code PFF when you sign up. And because basketball is nearing the final month of the season, they're giving you an opportunity to bet $1 to get $100 in free bets if the basketball team of your choosing hits a three-pointer. That's all they have to do, hit a three-pointer. So go find a team that hits a bunch of three-pointers, bet $1 on them, get $100 free, and then go bet it on the win totals and draft props that we're talking about during this podcast. Remember, that's promo code PFF when you sign up on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, and Pennsylvania are the only places this is eligible. You must be a new customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Also, Symbol, SIMBULL, which is basically the stock market for sports teams, is giving you a pretty sweet opportunity. So you can go on to Symbol, SIMBULL.app/PFF, use promo code PFF, deposit $10. You get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's $40 usually, gives you the draft guide. It'll take you all the way through next year, gives you access to all the premium content, all of our fantasy rankings. So it's a great deal. But here's the cool thing about Symbol is you can go and buy shares of teams. So for example, if you think the San Francisco 49ers are going to draft Justin Fields and you want to go buy some 49ers shares before he turns into the next big thing, you can go do so. And then when they win games, you get paid a dividend and you can trade shares as prices go up or down like the stock market. SIMBULL symbol.app/PFF, $10 deposit, free PFF subscription. Okay, now it is time to get to NFC win totals. Okay, we're going to do win totals. NFC. We talked about NFC South already. That was on a previous podcast. So let's start with the NFC West. The Los Angeles Rams, these are all via DraftKings Sportsbook. They are current. You can go get them right now. The Los Angeles Rams and the San Francisco 49ers are both 10.5, 123 to the over, minus 150 to the under. The Seattle Seahawks are 9.5, minus 134 to the over, 110 to the under, and the Arizona Cardinals are 8, minus 110 to both sides. By the way, if you go to pff.com, we have a page where we have all of the win totals, and if you are an Edge subscriber, you get all of the simulation results, the break-even percentages, our over and under percentages, and all of the picks that we have written up. God help me. All of the sides that we have written up so far. So go check that out. Let's start with the Rams and the 49ers. It's obvious why the juice is so much to the under. Does that intrigue you in any way, shape, or form?
Well, as somebody who lost a decent amount last year betting Rams under, I do still think under is the play for them. I mean, the number is 10.5, minus 150. So break even is 60%. We would make it about 69% to go under that. So, it's one of those where I think the Rams are going to be a team where a lot goes wrong and they're struggling in a tough division to win a lot of games. And, this under is a sharp play, especially 10.5 is a lot, right? Mm-hmm. There are those sort of like sample paths where we're looking at it and everything comes together. Ramsey's defensive player of the year. Donald is Donald. Leonard Floyd continues to be the player he is. And Stafford emerges and becomes the quarterback that apparently everybody thinks he is. Mm-hmm. And we're like, oh my God, this is such a stupid play to go under here. But I'd have to go under 10.5 here, even at the big minus 150, because I think it has value. San Francisco is a little bit of an interesting one. I probably will not bet.
I'm going to bet Justin Fields plus 250 instead, right?
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. Like,
if you're going, hey, like, I'm going to bet San Francisco under, you're really betting that their quarterback remains bad, okay? And if you're betting over, you're saying, well, they all of a sudden find a quarterback.
Yeah, which I see. So I could see a situation very similar to when Denver drafted Cutler in 2006, where they were a good team, and Jake Plummer took them to like week 11. They got to like 7-5 or something, and then Cutler took over and. They kind of battled it. 10-7 to me is like a perfectly fine record if Fields plays 7 to 9 of the games, and then they let Garoppolo play the first half of the season, and either he gets hurt or he doesn't perform. To me, that's why under here. But again, like that one, I have less certainty about just because, and I think that's why people are hammering under, because maybe they can come back when they can come back a little bit later when they know what the pick is, or if San Francisco does the unthinkable and drafts Mac Jones, or even Trey Lance. I think Trey Lance, to me, is another mark for the under here, because Trey Lance is a developmental guy more than the other two guys are.
By the way, we noted this a week ago when we talked about the NFC South. Usually, the sum of the win totals, even adjusted for price, is well shaded towards the over. And what we mean by that is there are 16 times 16 usually games that can be won, right? Wins. This year, there are 17 games, so 272 total wins that are going to happen this season. And it turns out that if you add up the adjusted totals, so that's adjusted for price, you get 273.
Which is one more.
Which is just one game more than will be won this season. Last year we saw, I think it was almost 7 games. So there was more value towards the under last year than there will be this year. And that's why the team that I want to talk about in this case, and the team that the bet that I would make in the NFC West, is the Arizona Cardinals over 8. Now, let me just start by saying that I hate this because I'm not sold on Cliff Kingsbury. I'm just not, okay? I'm not sold on Cliff Kingsbury. He does a ton of suboptimal things on fourth down. But we have Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. You have a bunch of young players because they have drafted so highly of late. You have Isaiah Simmons, who didn't play particularly well last year, but
I was going to bring him up, by the way. Yeah.
But I think is a guy like I do believe in Vance Joseph as a defensive guy. 8 wins, that would be 8 and 9. We have them going over this almost 60% of the time, 59% of the time. Break even would be 52.4. I really like the Cardinals over 8 wins.
Yeah, I actually was sending this to Renner because I was looking at the current linebackers. Jamin Davis, who's the guy that's leaping up the boards, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and then Micah Parsons. So I went back and looked at Simmons. And actually Simmons, if you look at the totality of his play last year, played really well, at the end. And you look at his comps for 2021, and you're looking at really good football players. There's a chance that the Arizona Cardinals defense gets significantly better this year. When you look at J.J. Watt, you look at Chandler Jones coming back from injury, you get a subtraction of a player. Hassan Reddick played one good season, but other than that, that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And they get rid of Patrick Peterson and replace him with Malcolm Butler, which is actually an upgrade. Peterson was a replacement level player last year.
Yeah, it was not good. There's a reason they let him go.
There's a reason they let him go. And obviously Vance Joseph, another year in that system. The offense, Kingsbury just has the thing with Kingsbury that I think is the most encouraging thing. It was much like it was with Arians and Leftwich last year in the playoffs. If you just figure out fourth down, or you get lucky and avoid enough fourth downs, I don't think he's as bad, right? But I do agree with the consensus that he's not as good as his name is, for sure. Yeah. But let me quickly end this with a couple things. They play the AFC South.
That's so great. That's a great thing for them.
And they play at Detroit, right? And that's a rebuilding team. They play at Chicago, whose win total is 7, right? 7.5. They play against Minnesota at home, and that team could go either way, right? They're actually trending upward. People are betting them over, but that could go either way. And then they play at Cleveland, which will be a tough one. But their schedule is not that bad. The schedule is they play in the NFC West, which is tough. But if you see regression, like in the NFC West, what you could see is a Seattle team that's falling apart a little bit, other than Russ. The Rams, who aren't as good as what everybody thinks, and the Niners team that's probably starting a rookie quarterback. So I like over there a lot. I really like you pointing that one out.
Kyler Murray was 27th in PFF grade in his rookie year. He was 13th last year, despite playing with an injury for basically the last 5 games of the season. But what he did last year that was super encouraging to me, first off, he threw the ball about 1.5 yards further downfield on average. Yet his percentage of throws that were on target increased by about 2%. Similarly, he cut his sack rate in half by about cut his sack rate in half despite being under pressure less frequently. That didn't make any sense. The point is he took fewer sacks. Every time that he didn't throw a pass, they still gained positive EPA per play, which when you think about, okay, either he scrambles or he gets sacked, that is tremendous from what Kyler Murray was able to do last year. So I like over there as do you. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Seattle real quick.
Seattle's trending up a little bit, but still an interesting number to say the least, right?
For them to be third here, I think I would prefer to bet them to win the division at 3-1 than to bet over 9.5.
Yes.
We don't show a lot of value.
We do see some value on under at plus 110. I just really see, so we have it at 55%, break even's 48%. But honestly, like, if I'm going to tie my money up from now until January, I'm going to do it on something other than betting against Russ. You know, like, yeah.
Especially a motivated Russell Wilson. All right, let's do the NFC North. Green Bay Packers, 10.5, -143 to the over, +118 to the under. Minnesota Vikings, 8.5, -143 over, +118 under. Chicago Bears, 7, -110 to both sides. And the Detroit Lions, 5, +100 over, -121 under. Start with the Packers. What are your thoughts?
I mean, look, our number for them is 10.5. It is 10.5. We do see a slight edge on the under just because it's so juiced towards the over. +118 is basically what you're getting there. You need only 46%. We see it at 49%. That being said, there's so many sample paths where they're literally the only show in town in this division. So, like, I'm good. I don't want anything there.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch them either. I do think it's interesting. They have such a, they have a huge edge clearly on any other team in this division. You look at the Vikings, 8.5, and you go, man, 8.5, like, that's not super high for a team with a good offense. But they just have a way of being average. Like, that's just the Vikings. Like, they just have a way of doing that.
Well, and have the Vikings really gotten better this offseason? I think they get Danielle Hunter back.
Well, the hope is that all the rookies, like.
But Jeff Gladney's going to prison. So like that's one of your 2 first-round picks last year. So, like,
that's true. Maybe Justin Jefferson can play some wide receivers.
But like, if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, and they lost their left tackle. They cut their left tackle, right? So you lose a left tackle. You don't have an NFL player there yet.
Yep.
You get Danielle Hunter back, you put your corners are going to be Patrick Peterson and Cameron Dantzler inside Mackenzie Alexander, who they got back. They lost Anthony Harris to the Philadelphia Eagles, and they lost Eric Wilson, who was a good linebacker for them, to the Philadelphia Eagles as well. You're depending upon an increasingly aging linebacker group, an increasingly a young corner paired with an old corner, an aging superstar at safety, and a defensive lineman that has one player that can get pressure on the passer. To me, that's a bunch of bad bets. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball, and I'll be the first to admit they were awesome last year on offense. But to expect career years out of Cousins, Cook, Jefferson, and Thielen again is, to me, a bad bet. Like, I think under here at +118, it opened at like the exact opposite. It opened at like -125, -140 to the under. I think at +118, I might be shorting the Vikings again, guys.
I can't believe it. I'm absolutely shocked. Look, you've heard it here first. Eric Eager shorting the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is something that I did not think I would ever get on this podcast and say. But this is proof that I don't hate the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Do not hate the Chicago Bears. In fact, this year, I will be placing a bet on the Chicago Bears to win
the North.
Over.
Oh, to win over,
yeah. 7 games.
Is, I think, kind of ridiculous.
They are not a good team.
They're taking under money too, by the way.
They're not a good team, okay? But that's because their quarterback position has been a fucking shit show. And it's been a shit show in a way that prevents you from winning anything. I mean, just because their quarterbacks have been accuracy disasters, okay? Now, Andy Dalton is not, he's not the answer. He's not winning you a Super Bowl. He's not even winning you a division. He's not even competing for a division. But you know what he is? He is consistently average. That's something they haven't had. They've been, Eric, consistently garbage. They go from consistently garbage to consistently average with Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson is like, you know what? Fuck. Andy Dalton, this ain't that bad. Like, he's accurate. If you just stay upright, like, at least I know the throw isn't going to be, I don't need LeBron James standing on my shoulders to catch the pass. They are one of the best rosters outside of quarterback. 7 wins. We have that almost 70%, about 70% over in our simulations. I love it.
Yeah, they also have a really good advantage in the sense that I think that their coaching staff's a little underrated. I think people give Nagy a lot of flack But I think he's
They
better.
assume Pace is calling plays.
Yeah, they do have to break in a new defensive coordinator this year, which is a little bit different because, so you're talking about Sean Desai is his name, who is replacing the retired and aforementioned Chuck Pagano. So he's out, but and they lose Kyle Fuller, but they got Jalen Johnson. I think the draft will be meaningful for them, because they do need to replenish for the future. And there is a bunch of situations where it's like Detroit last year, where the wheels fall off early, Pace is fired, Nagy's fired, and then you're dead under the whole rest of the way. But absent that, I think 7's a really, a really offensive number for them.
I don't think we need to talk about the Detroit Lions.
No, the Lions and as well as the Houston Texans required us to put a different variable in our algorithm because
after last year's offseason where we talked about the Lions so much, I don't know that I'll be ready to talk about the Lions for at least another couple of years.
I'll say this. In 3 or 4 years, we say this all the time, but when the quarterbacks in the division are Spencer Rattler, Jordan Love, some 5th round pick that the Vikings try to convince us all that it's going to be good, and Andy Dalton, I do think Detroit will be okay.
The NFC East. All right, this one is interesting. The Dallas Cowboys, 9.5, plus 110 over, minus 134 under. Washington Football Team, 8, minus 134 over, plus 110 under. New York Football Giants, minus 110 to both sides. And your Philadelphia Eagles, 6.5, minus 134 over, plus 110 to the under. Where do you want to start here?
Let's eliminate Philly. So our number for Philly is 6.6. The current number is 6.5. And then Philly's juiced over. We actually have no value there from a betting perspective, I don't think. Hardly any. So maybe a little bit over, but it's tough to buy in. So let's eliminate Philly from the discussion. Washington, by the way, did you hear on Peacock today
No.
what your guy Ron Rivera said?
No.
So Ron Rivera, Jeremy Schaap is Ron Rivera's best friend right now because Ron Rivera said something to the effect of, something can be a 99 out of 100 bet, but you got to think about the 1% all the time. So that's why going for 2. So the money quote was,
Damn it.
If you're down 14 and you score a touchdown, you got momentum. If you go for 2 to try to cut it 6 and you miss, you lose momentum.
Lose it all.
And so, is Ron Rivera canceled? I don't know.
No, I refuse to cancel Ron Rivera.
Yeah, he's
Riverboat Ron after all. Now, I found this interesting. Team to draft Trey Lance, Denver Broncos plus 300.
Which a bet I like, by the way.
Okay, but here are the teams at plus 400: the Atlanta Falcons, San Francisco 49ers. I can't speak today, and the Washington Football Team at plus 400. I think there's a chance Washington goes all in to get a quarterback, given that there are 5 quarterbacks available here.
I can see it too, for sure. That would be a haul. That's like depending on which pick it is, that's like a Mahomesian type trade, right? That's like it's 19-6, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, but also maybe not as high up.
Right. It depends upon where people think Lance is going to go. So
if the Denver Broncos galaxy brain themselves into Drew Lock, it's a possibility. Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys here, because last year you were at first kind of before it got out of control, a proponent of the over. I disagreed with you a little bit, basically saying that I thought this would be the year. Now that it's this year, I still don't know if I feel that great about it all. I will say this. There are a couple of things going for them. First off, obviously Dak Prescott coming back. They have great supporting cast. The offensive line, a little questionable.
But getting people back that are pretty
Getting people
good.
back. And on defense, they can't be nearly as bad. They simply cannot be nearly as bad.
And just even getting to that point during the second half of the season put them in playoff contention at the end, which was, under the radar. Like their defense wasn't bleeding last year at the end.
Yeah, that said, 10-7.
Yeah, I think under is the only play here.
Feels a little rich to me. So if I were to, I don't know that this is one that I am going to bet. But if I were to, under 9.5, -134 would be where I'd go.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's really the only place to go. The other thing is they replaced Mike Nolan with Dan Quinn, our friend, former PFF Alkins head coach. That is probably an addition by subtraction, but Quinn has, an addition. That's probably a positive addition for them.
Yeah. Everyone's going to say like, oh, Dan Quinn was so bad as a head coach. Let me tell you something. There's a huge difference between head coach and defensive coordinator. Like, look at Vance Joseph. Not a good head coach. Has been fine as a defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And there are some people who I think have been better head coaches than coordinators too. So like when somebody like Anthony Lynn goes to be the offensive coordinator with Detroit, you might have to push back a little bit. Or Raheem Morris is the defensive coordinator for the Rams. I think those are guys who I have to wait and see for a little bit. Quinn, I'm not the highest on Quinn as a defensive. I know he took some of the times when he took the play calls away in Atlanta, I wasn't like all that impressed, but he obviously does have the Seattle background, and
yeah.
It'll be interesting what they do. By the way, when I did the market implied mock last week, it was like the first defensive player at the time favored was Micah Parsons, but the first defensive player got to Dallas, and I'm like, you have to take Surtain there, right? Like you have to.
There's no way they can take a linebacker.
And the problem is, I think Jerry's going to fuck up the 10th pick. Like that's my biggest.
Think so?
Yes. I think there's one sample path where the 4th pick
from the yacht.
Yes,
No.
From the yacht.
No.
Because I don't think that there's.
You can't make a bad decision on the yacht.
I think that there's a situation where they trade up for Kyle Pitts.
I do too. I think there's a legit situation where the Cowboys trade up. I think Jerry thinks, and he honestly isn't totally wrong. Like the opportunity to become an offensive powerhouse and blow this division out of the water, I do think is there. And if you look at selecting in a weak defensive draft the best defensive player at 10, okay. But I don't know what it costs to go up and get Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, and I can't imagine Jerry. By the way, Jerry of the Jimmy Johnson draft chart moved back, build a Super Bowl ilk from 30 years ago. I don't know if he's. I think they're gonna. I think they're gonna do something like move up and get Morris Claiborne like they did a couple of years ago, and it's like, like their best decision is to just have a full draft, get some players in. Hopefully a significant amount of them on defense, and just be average defensively, because their offense is going to be, especially in that division, you're going to get regression from Washington's defense, although the Giants defense looks pretty solid. And you also have, the Eagles, who are going to be this is their division to lose, but they could lose it with some decisions they make in 3 weeks.
Yes. The Giants are at 7, -110 to both sides. I think this is an interesting one. I think if I had to bet one side, our simulation likes over here. I don't feel great about it, but both Cowboys and the football team are getting significantly more kind of publicity and all that. And you could talk me into it.
The hard part with the Giants is I can totally see them doing like an 11.
Oh, we have an announcement.
Oh, yeah. I know. Like, did he bogey the first hole? Or?
Hideki Matsuyama has shanked his drive on one into the forest.
Oh, man, if we do shot by shot, I don't know if I'm going to survive.
If we hit 25-1, we're turning into a golf podcast,
yeah.
Okay? Maybe we'll just be a full-time Masters podcast.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Printing money for the people.
Yeah.
Oh, you hate to see it. The weight of Japan is it's an island, but it's a lot of media weight on your shoulders.
Which, by the way, I think somebody else also said that he had the weight of Japan on his shoulders and was getting roasted for it on Twitter. I can't remember who said it, but they thought it was funny. The Giants very much could have a good season this year if they get I can see like 2017 Jags type of season where the defense is actually pretty damn good. They built pieces, and then you get like a passable performance out of Daniel Jones with some decent weapons, and the rest of the division falters. Like that's the path for the Giants. I can't bet under 7, but I could bet over 7 because of the possibility that occurs. It's just, to me, it's like you got Jason Garrett calling plays.
Oh my goodness, this shot's even worse than I thought. That looks like me on the first tee. Holy Jesus! All right,
God, man,
the field syndicate. We've got Xander Schauffele making moves now. By the way, you're listening to this, and the Masters is probably either ending or over, so you know what my afternoon has been like already.
Yeah.
The Eagles, I am, as you know, a Jalen Hurts supporter. I am not going over 6.5. I am terrified of what they took a step backwards in coaching, in my opinion. God only knows what the offense is going to look like, or if they're even going to try and compete.
There's a recipe for disaster in this coaching staff, which is that Sirianni is going to call plays, and he's never called plays before. It's honestly what Brad Childress did in Minnesota, where you're that like caddy offensive coordinator that doesn't call plays, right? And then you go somewhere, and then you're like, well, I can. Where Shane Steichen's on the staff actually did a really good job for the Chargers last year. I don't know. Like I think the Eagles might be picking first next. Like we should almost, if they put up a prop of who's the number one pick next year. There's some teams, obviously Detroit and Houston, obviously feel like the favorites.
Houston's added a lot of great players in the free agency.
But I think the Eagles could low key be one of those teams too.
Also, I should just say, I almost went back and deleted every positive tweet that I've ever sent out about Deshaun Watson. And I didn't know. Because remember before, it was like, oh man, this guy's such a good football player.
He also seemed like a great guy off the field.
Yeah, seemed like a great guy off the field.
So did Darren Sharper too. We don't know these things. The problem is, you don't have to do that, okay? Everybody knows that that if this is true, and we're inclined to believe the women, if it is true, it's awful. That doesn't negate us misreading the person. It's not our job, right? Our job isn't to character evaluate Deshaun Watson way back when he was playing. So you don't have to feel guilty about being like, oh man, he seems like a great guy, and he also is a great football player. No, when information comes in, you change your opinion. That's what life is called. So you don't have to feel bad about anything Deshaun Watson's side.
I should know that I can't understand how the death knell isn't getting 5 massages a week. How is that not just okay, there's something totally wrong with this situation?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Well, and I just, and from everything that everybody else tells us, you find one massage. It's you find one masseuse, and that's it. And this should have been. But again, it's no one's fault besides his that this has happened. I'm not blaming Houston. I'm not. It's literally the one thing that wasn't the Houston Texans' fault. But there are things where it's oh, my prior that this is true is going up significantly, and it's important to be honest about it. It's also important it's important to address the situation even-handedly as well. I was not joking, but I said Gladney going to if Gladney's guilty of what his girlfriend or wife accused him of, that's probably true. But and the same thing's true about Watson.
Those are the NFC South real quick, just very, very quickly. Tampa Bay Bucks, so we can clear the whole NFC. Tampa Bay Bucks 11.5 -125 over, +103 to the under. New Orleans Saints 9 -110 both sides. The Carolina Panthers 7.5 -106 over, -115 under, and the Atlanta Falcons somehow have the lowest win total in the NFC South, 7 -143 to the over, +118 to the under. So if you adjust it, it's about the same.
You know why the price is so high for the over for the Falcons? Because it's worth it.
Because we talked about it. Obviously, moving markets.
I feel like you'd like that after going out to eat with me a few times. Be like, you know why this Wagyu beef is so expensive? Because it's worth it. That's why the Falcons over is so expensive.
And guess what? Am I done betting it? Absolutely fucking not. No, I am not done betting it. The Atlanta Falcons, I still think, I really like the Cardinals. The Falcons are still my favorite win total bet. Over 7 -143. I just love it. I love it so much. There's a legitimate path to them being the best offense. And I know the Buccaneers are great. They just won the Super Bowl. There's a path to the Falcons being the best offense in this division, if not one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah.
Period. And people are shitting on Matt Ryan. Someone the other day I was having a conversation with, and I was like, who do you think the better quarterback is right now? Ryan Tannehill or Matt Ryan? And if you ask the people, I don't think it'd be even close. People are like, oh, it's Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah. Do you think we at PFF contribute to that at all, in the sense that because I remember tweeting out something so when I talked about the middle class quarterback article, somebody snipped out the Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill where I said they were good but not elite, and they're like, oh, funny because your website graded Tannehill as the highest grade quarter, and I'm like, yes, the world existed prior to 2019 and 20. And Like that's good, both in the good sense and the bad sense. Like Matt Ryan has had good, not great years for the past 2 years. Tannehill's amazing years, but like you're also giving Tannehill's offensive coordinator Ryan. I'll say this: I just actually ran these numbers last night because I'm doing some fantasy football stuff on the betting market. I am making like, and this might be a little low, but like my handicap for Tannehill is 3.5 points better than the replacement guy. My handicap for Matt Ryan is 6. So I think Ryan on a neutral field is like 2.5 points better than Tannehill is.
I would agree, and I think after this season, people will go, "Oh shit."
Yeah. Like, there are some levers here. Again, like it sucks because quarterback matters the most, but it also depends upon a lot of things. That's why we call stuff first order, and we don't call everything else nothing. We call it second order. That's, the way it goes.
Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. This was the PFF forecast. This was a lot of fun. I'm excited for
a lot of energy.
I can't wait for your Masters. This is gonna be a hell of an afternoon. We'll be back on Wednesday. We're hoping Thomas Dimitrov will be joining us. It'll be a bunch of fun. Thank you. Peace. Love you. See you.